Tony D and Little Joan somewhere behind me, and this is a screenwriter's rant on The Stress Is Killing Me, a comedy movie that is pretty much textbook how not to write a comedy. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Check out my books. The links are in the description. Comedy horror in South Jersey. It's the Pineys. Books 1 through 16 available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. So, pretty much everything in this movie is this should be taught in a class of how not to write a comedy movie. I don't know who wrote this thing. Feels like it was written by committee. But this is just awful in my opinion. And I rarely just come right out and say something like that. I try to be constructive, but this is first off, it looks like a hotel movie. I call them hotel movies. It's like these movies that are shot and they had enough of a budget to shoot the movie, but not enough to really spend a good amount on it. They're shot like almost like soap operas, almost like TV, and they're just not good. Just not good at all. I don't. It's so not good. I can't even find a good still of this movie to indicate its deal. But let me tell you the premise. The Stress Is Killing Me is about 8 friends who come to a reunion, a college reunion, and they all have stressful jobs. And they all secretly wish they could have other jobs, and they're all staying at this resort, I guess, or house for this reunion, and they decide that since they have the house, they're all going to try the jobs that they've always wanted to have. Now, that's a dumb enough premise as it is, because you can imagine if you got with your friends that you hadn't seen in 20 years, you'd probably spend most of that time getting drunk, eating food, and talking about old times. No. These people are so unhappy in their workplace, they've decided, no, we're all going to spend the weekend LARPing about other jobs. And when I say they do the other jobs, they pretend they're actors playing characters, then pretending they're real people who are then pretending to do these other jobs. So, for instance, one of the guys wants to be a detective. So they create, you could see it later on. There's a cardboard police station that they make. It says police on it. I don't know if I can find it again. It's just dumb. One guy wants to direct a movie, so they all pretend to be in his movie. But they're just pretending. They're not really experiencing the job. So what does that get you exactly? There's nothing more unfunny than characters pretending to be someone else and being bad at it. And they're all universally bad at the other job. Now, this is the kind of movie that if someone was sitting down writing the screenplay, and I severely think that it was written by a committee, like a group of people who thought this was funny. On paper, it might seem funny to an amateur who hasn't written a lot of comedy. That might seem like a funny premise, right? Oh, well, they all have stressful jobs, and they all wish they had other jobs. And now they're all going to try the other jobs, and they're all going to be bad at it. That's kind of sounds like a funny premise. But pragmatically speaking, it's never going to work. Because, number one, they're not really doing the job. So there's nothing at stake, right? So if I go to a hotel, let's say, and pretend I'm a pastor and I'm bad at it, nothing happens, right? And I'm around my friends, so they're just going to be like, well, you're not very good at this. And that's it. That's the worst that can happen. Like, if they actually somehow got in the position and then could do some actual damage. So, like, if you actually made one of these guys a police detective for the day somehow. I mean, it's a comedy movie. You could probably figure out a way. And then, like, he let a dangerous criminal go. That would be real world consequences of his terrible actions, and he would learn a lesson like, oh, I should not be a police officer. I've let a very dangerous criminal go. That would be kind of funny. Although another problem with it, there's 8 characters, which is way too many. That's way too many, even for a 2-hour movie. So you just split it like this. So let's say you've got 8 characters, and you give them each 10 minutes in their job. That's 80 minutes of the movie already, which gives you about 10 minutes, on either side to introduce the characters and end the movie. So it's just too many characters. Maybe you could do 6. 6 could be doable. I would cut it. Ideally, you would want 4, because you could really get into some stuff. Additionally, one of the characters wants to be a sex therapist, which is an odd choice, but it's also like an easy choice for someone who thinks that would be funny. So, for instance, to give you an example, when I was on my comedy show in college and we'd audition people for the show, we would ask them to do a scene returning something to a store. And almost everybody, and they were all amateurs, they were all students, almost all of them, every single one of them tried to return a used condom. Like, every single time. I think there was 1 or 2 people who didn't, and we kind of liked that their initiative was, oh, okay, so at least they weren't doing that. But that was the go-to, because that, on paper in your head, that sounds funny, but in actual practice, it's stupid. It's a stupid scene. No one returns a used condom to a store. It just sort of sounds funny in that second when you have to respond. So saying a sex therapist, same deal. It sounds funny, but when you actually try to do it, it's just weird and uncomfortable. Why would anybody look to do this? Again, if there were real world consequences, if the character actually got to be a sex therapist, like replaced a actual sex therapist, which to me isn't really much of a job, but let's say it is, then, and then they actually ended up having an orgy with real clients. Yeah, that could be real world consequences, and that could be funny, but that's not what's happening here. They're all pretending. It's characters pretending, which there's no stakes, and it's not funny. It's just not funny. Now, I don't know if I blame the actors. They're probably just actors looking for work, and they got this gig, and they got paid some money, and it's fine. So it's not on them, although they're the face of this. It's just that the people who put the movie together and wrote the screenplay should have never greenlit it. They should have known this was bad. And had they consulted an actual comedy writer, I think they might have looked at the screenplay and said, yeah, this really isn't going to work. You need something with real world consequences, so there's actual stakes, and so people could feel a little uncomfortable when somebody is an actual sex therapist and betrays the therapy profession because they don't know what they're doing. Like, that could be something that's funny. So first act, I'm going to look it up on the IMDb if it's on here. The first act is they get together and for this reunion, and they all hate their jobs. Tom Carroll wrote and directed this. What if you could try a new career for a week? Friends at their 20th college reunion try it. The outcome is hilarious. I say it is not. Tom, no offense. It's just not. It's not good. You needed a real comedian to write the screenplay, like somebody who's really funny. So they get together and they all have stressful jobs, and they all decide, hey, let's all try the other jobs, and we'll all pretend. Like one of them says, oh, I want to be a yoga instructor. It's a weird choice too, because it's like, it's hard to be bad as a yoga instructor. I mean, I'm sure there are bad yoga instructors. It's not really a lot of bad consequences of that, you know. If somebody has already, I assume someone who's wanted to be a yoga instructor would have actually done yoga, right? Probably did it for a while, probably halfway to being a yoga instructor, just for whatever reason doesn't have the time or doesn't know how to go about it, and maybe has a career with real money, and yoga instructing usually probably doesn't pay nearly as much, and the character who wants to do that is normally a lawyer. So, of course, in the scene, she's pushing down on one of the other characters, and you hear his back crack, like she's hurting him. And then what? then what? Okay, she's bad. She's so stupid. She's bad at being a yoga instructor. Okay. What's the rest of that scene? There's nowhere to go. And once you've established, you have 8 characters here. Once you establish like 2 or 3 of them, and they're all uniformly bad at their jobs, like disastrously so, seeing the next 4 isn't going to be funny or surprising. Comedy is about surprise. One guy wants to be a chef, and of course, everybody gets sick on his food. Like, you could see that joke coming not a mile away. I can see that joke from space coming. Again, if you were going to really do this, you know, the guy who wants to be a chef, you could have probably actually had him do that. I mean, he sort of does, but actually replace him in a restaurant. Like, maybe you could have had the characters, I don't know, bribe. Maybe they have so much money, they could just bribe their way into these other jobs. And then they do, and it's a disaster. And then there's actual consequences. You know, instead of just his friends getting sick, which again isn't that big a deal. Like, an entire restaurant full of strangers gets sick, and the restaurant is in big trouble now. Like, that would be funnier, because you would have all these massive consequences. And then you would want characters, after some of those consequences, to start going, I don't think this is a good idea to do anymore. And they're like, no, this is going to work out. And then you'd have to explain why they went through all these extreme lengths to change their jobs. There would probably be one character. And maybe that character could initiate it all because they wanted to be, I don't know, an HR person, a job placement person for some reason. And they're doing all the job placement. And at the end, we get some revelation about that character and why they wanted to do this. And you have a moment, and then the characters go back to their jobs. But even the title, The Stress Is Killing Me, it screams like trying too hard to be funny. And what you really needed here, Tom, was an actual comedian guy to write the screenplay. And, you know, some people bash me in the comments, oh, you think you're so good, whatever. Look, I specialize in dialogue. I'm pretty good with comedy, action, stuff like that. You can read my books and find out for yourself. You know, but there are plenty of other guys that are good at it too. The first thing you want to do in hiring somebody who writes a comedy script is see their comedy bona fides. Now, that's not necessarily screenplays, because it's really hard to get a screenplay produced, and even if you get it produced, it doesn't come out, as the writer, you don't really have that much say in it. But, guys who do stand-up, guys who have performed comedy, who have a long history of being involved in comedic works. I mean, there are guys who have written for comedy shows on television. They're always looking for work, and they're not super expensive. I know guys who have written comedy and they need work. So it's not that hard to find a guy, or at least get one guy to go over your screenplay and punch it up. Fill it full of one-liners that at least, if the plot isn't all that great, the jokes will be, it'll be zing, zing, zing. Here it just feels like a guy in your, office wrote this. Like a corporate guy wrote it. He feels like one of the characters in the movie. Like, oh, I always wanted to be a comedy writer, write a comedy screenplay. And then he wrote this. So, would I see it? No, I can't. I physically, I almost couldn't watch the end of this trailer. It's cringe. Should have never been made. And I'm going to give it a rare downvote. I almost never downvote anything, but I have to downvote this. All right, here's the review, the write-up. At the 20th college reunion, 8 old friends take a house for the week and decide trying to do their own dream jobs, teacher, detective, sex therapist, instead of their boring jobs, and their dream jobs all go hilariously wrong. First off, whose dream job is it to be a teacher? It's kind of a boring job. To me, a dream job would be like lion tamer, right? Or surgeon. Like, if you're gonna go, again, in comedy, you have to go big. A brain surgeon, head of CEO of some big tech startup in Silicon Valley. Like, you want to think of the biggest jobs. The biggest, most spectacular jobs that people have. Teacher? Okay. Like, maybe you could say teacher with special needs, and then, the outcome of that might be hilarious, as the characters have to act like special needs kids in order to make that work. But that wouldn't be a politically correct movie, but I'd probably watch that. Comedy's about 2 things: surprise and timing. It also doesn't hurt to take bold risk, but you could probably get away without taking huge risk if you do a lot of fart jokes. But man, I can't think of a more timid, tame concept than this movie. I wish I could have been there to stop you, to say, no, this is a bad screenplay. We really need to rethink this. And, would have come up with something else. I mean, it's even odd to have a 20th year reunion for college friends. I mean, like, that's not even particularly great. Not a lot of people do that, so it's less relatable, and the comedy's not, like if it had been a 20th year high school reunion, but I assume since some of the actors were older and maybe couldn't get younger people, you decided, no, we'll go with college, I guess. Or, they could have all been on a sports team together, maybe, or something like that from 20 years ago. I just don't know why you made this. Again, I think this will end up on, hotel sort of movie services. Be the kind of movie you put on, like, oh, well, that's a kind of a funny title. Let me see if this is any good. You put it on, you just kind of tune out and start looking at your phone, and then you're next thing you know, you realize, oh, I've been on X for like 20 minutes. I don't even know what's going on in this movie. And then you turn it off and go to sleep and get up for your meeting the next day. That's kind of what it feels like. Anyhow, I just I've written comedy for a long time, so it just it kind of hurts me when somebody makes a comedy movie and it just fails in ways that are so utterly avoidable, you know. And look, comedy's really tough. It's the toughest thing you could do in a movie. You know, I've often said the only thing a comedy movie has to do is be funny. That's it. If it's funny, it doesn't matter if it makes no sense. It doesn't matter who's in it. It doesn't matter what happens. If you're laughing at that movie, success. If you're not laughing, it's a failure. So this just, I feel like the person who did this movie went into it with a complete lack of understanding of the comedic mind. And I hope they understand that this isn't the right way. Don't make another one of these. Please, do not make another one. Do not make a sequel, whatever you do. You need to hire a professional comedy writer next time to write your comedy. If you want to do comedies, and I think you want to, you need to hire a comedy guy to write your movie. And they have very specific set of skills. Okay? At the very least, find a funny stand-up guy, let him read the screenplay ahead of time, and let him give you feedback. Because maybe a guy like that would have said, what the hell is this? There's not one funny thing in this movie. So, no, I would not watch this movie. I would actively discourage people from watching this movie. I would dive across the room to turn off the TV if I saw so much as a frame of this movie. Anyhow, that's it for me, Tony D. And Little Joan somewhere behind me. Remember, it's all just my opinion. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow on the live stream.